This content is AI generated for informational purposes only and should not be directly used for clinical decision-making.
Hello, and welcome back to the Neurosurgery Hub podcast. I'm Dr. Aris, a senior attending in neurosurgery.
And I'm Dr. Alara, a research fellow. Today we're looking at a fascinating new study from BMJ Open, published in 2026, titled Days Alive and Out of Hospital After Burr-hole Drainage for Chronic Subdural Hematoma, a national cohort study using hospital episode statistics in England.
This is a timely paper, Alara. As we know, chronic subdural hematoma, or CSDH, is becoming one of the most common neurosurgical presentations, particularly in our aging population. While we often focus on technical success in the OR, the way we measure the success of the recovery phase is evolving.
Exactly. Traditional metrics usually look at 30-day mortality or perhaps the length of stay for the index admission, but this study investigates the utility of a relatively newer metric, days alive and out of hospital, or DAOH.
For the residents listening, let's break that down. DAOH is a composite outcome. It doesn't just look at whether the patient lived or died. It looks at the total time spent in the community versus time spent in a hospital bed, or, unfortunately, time lost due to death. Why did the authors choose this for CSDH specifically?
Well, the authors used the hospital episode statistics in England to look at a massive national cohort of patients who underwent burr-hole drainage. For CSDH patients, the postoperative course can be complicated by slow mobilization, social care needs, or readmissions for recurrence. DAOH captures all of that. It effectively combines mortality and hospital bed days into a single continuous variable.
It's a more patient-centered metric in many ways. A patient doesn't just care if they survived the burr-hole drainage, they care about how quickly they got back to their own bed. What did the study say about the validity of this metric in this specific neurosurgical context?
The study set out to evaluate the validity of the DAOH metric within this national CSDH cohort. They found that it's a robust tool for reflecting the complexity of the recovery process. Instead of just saying, this patient stayed 10 days, DAOH accounts for the fact that if a patient dies on day 5, their outcome is significantly worse than a patient who is discharged on day 5. In a traditional length of stay metric, those two patients might look similar in terms of bed occupancy, but their clinical outcomes are polar opposites.
That's a crucial point. If we only look at hospital bed days, a death early in the admission actually looks efficient for the system, which is a morbid paradox. DAOH fixes that by penalizing mortality. Now, the abstract mentions looking at this at an organizational level. How does that help us as surgeons or department chairs?
This is where it gets interesting for practicing neurosurgeons. The researchers examined how DAOH compares to its constituent outcomes, specifically mortality and hospital bed days, at an organizational level. By using DAOH, a hospital or a neurosurgical unit can get a much clearer picture of their overall performance. It highlights variations in care that mortality alone might miss. For example, 2 units might have the same mortality rate for CSDH, but 1 unit might have a significantly higher DAOH because they have better postoperative rehabilitation pathways or lower readmission rates for recurrences.
So it allows for a more nuanced comparison between different neurosurgical centers across England. It essentially asks, how good are we at getting these patients back to their lives?
Precisely. Because they used the hospital episode statistics, or HES data, they were able to track the patient's journey across different hospitals, not just the one where the burr-hole drainage was performed. If a patient is transferred to a local hospital for rehab or readmitted elsewhere, DAOH captures that.
It's a very high-level view. For our medical students and residents, when you're reading this paper, notice how they move away from binary outcomes, life or death, and move toward a continuous scale. It gives a much more granular look at the burden of the disease and the efficacy of the intervention.
And the study concludes that DAOH is indeed a valid and useful metric for this population. It provides a more holistic view of the success of burr-hole drainage than just looking at whether the hematoma was evacuated or if the patient survived to discharge.
It's about the quality of the survival. If we're doing more burr-hole drainages than ever before, we need to ensure our health systems are optimized to return these patients to their homes. DAOH seems to be the yardstick that will help us measure that progress.
Definitely. It's a powerful tool for future clinical trials and for quality improvement within the NHS and beyond.
A fascinating study indeed. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on the Neurosurgery Hub podcast.
See you next time.